I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's April 15th, 2025. In a bid to restart White's Ferry, which connects Poolesville and Loudoun County across the Potomac River, Montgomery County offers $3 million to the farm owner who owns the ferry landing site on the Virginia side. MCPS wants to tighten grading policy after almost 20 years of growing leniency. The Blueprint Accountability and Implementation Board Chair, Ike Leggett, says that K-12 education funding at the state level remains on track despite the budget crisis. Washington, D.C. inaugurated a new full-service hospital east of the Potomac River, an area known for poverty and the absence of services. It's been a cooler spring, and we have planting recommendations from the Washington gardener, Kathy Jentz.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by UMBC's Political Science Program, where you'll learn to shape public policy, impact communities, and function at the center of modern society. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society moving precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Baltimore composer and woodwind player Seth Keibel. The songs come from his 2018 album Tiny Hands, Big Desk. Flo Anito on vocals, Christian Perez on guitar, Bob Abbott double bass, Tom Teasley on percussion, and Seth Keibel on the clarinet. Sound recording and engineering by Mike Harvey, Wes Lanich, and Steve Steckler.
Little group of states pulled the tiny levers for the big mouth guy and left us all with one huge colossal mistake. Dum, 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 dum. Tiny hands behind a great big desk, thin-skinned, immature, and self-obsessed. Tiny man full of fear and ire. Tiny hands might set the world on fire.
White's Ferry used to be a way to get from Poolesville in Montgomery County, Maryland, to Loudoun County, Virginia, without having to cross the American Legion Bridge on the Capitol Beltway or going all the way to Point of Rocks, Maryland, for the next bridge. You could take your bike or your car onto the ferry, cross the Potomac River in 20 minutes. But since 2021, the ferry has been closed. The then owner of the ferry sold the operation to Chuck Kuhn, the founder of the company JK Moving, who is a Loudoun County resident. The landing site on the Virginia side, however, belongs to Libby Devlin and her family. The land has been a part of her family for generations when her grandfather allowed the ferry free access to the landing site. That was in the 1950s. Since then, Rockland Farm, the family's name for the land and the agricultural operation on it, has sought to get paid for the use of the landing site. Several years in court cases later, when the judge ruled in favor of Rockland and the ferry operator did not want to pay, Libby Devlin and her family shut down access to the landing site. For the last 4 years, Chuck Kuhn and Libby Devlin have been engaged in a battle. Kuhn has made offers of money and threatened Devlin with eminent domain action, but Loudoun and Virginia have not obliged. When she was on I Hate Politics many years ago, Libby Devlin said that she would like a per vehicle fee rather than a lump sum payment. The reason is clear. There is a Virginia Department of Transportation report that shows that the revenue from an upgraded ferry crossing would be more than $20 million. Whoever has access to the landing site stands to make a lot of money if Virginia and Maryland develop the ferry crossing as a real alternative to upgrading the American Legion Bridge. The ferry's closure from Devlin and Kuhn not being able to reach a deal has led Poolesville and Montgomery County's agricultural reserve to lose tourism dollars, though it is unclear how much. More definitively, it has added hours to the commutes of area residents with jobs in Loudoun and no more a ferry shortcut. After intense lobbying for years, Montgomery County Department of Transportation and the town of Poolesville have now made an offer of $3 million to Rockland Farm. But it is unclear whether Libby Devlin will take the offer. In an email statement, Devlin said, "The $3 million is not an offer to either the Maryland owners or to Rockland Farm. It is to be used as an incentive to help get a ferry restarted." Montgomery County has made it clear that is all they can do. There are legal, zoning, and ownership issues that prevent Montgomery County from doing more. Ferry restoration must be resolved between the two private parties, Potomac Crossing LLC, which is owned by Chuck Kuhn, and Rockland Farm LLC, which is owned by Devlin and her family. I cannot tell you which structure that arrangement may or may not be at this point because we are exploring our options. However, we are working in good faith to restore ferry service. End quote. For nearly 20 years now, Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland have been loosening academic standards. In 2008, MCPS introduced the 50% rule, which was intended to encourage students from giving up on a class because of low scores. The rule said that teachers must give students 50% if students attempt a test. Over time, the 50% rule devolved into students simply writing their name on the test sheet. In 2017, MCPS ended final exams in favor of shorter district assessments. And finally, during the pandemic, academic rigor was replaced with empathy, and MCPS's reputation has suffered. Finally, last week, MCPS announced plans to right the ship. At a Board of Education meeting, MCPS Chief Learning and Instruction Officer Nikki Hazel explained.
There are inconsistencies that we have heard about and we see about how grades are assigned and inconsistencies around how grades are communicated. We also know that there is a lack of alignment between the grades students receive and them actually mastering the content. Grades keep going up and up, but the standardized tests are way off. Another student said, because the 2-quarter grades are calculated with a generous rounding policy, I absolutely find myself trying hard for good grades the first quarter and taking an easier second quarter. Another student said students can get high grades without mastering materials. Another said teachers who teach the exact same class give completely different assignments and the numbers of assignments. And then some schools only offer honors courses, yet they are not taught at the honors level. What we are proposing is that we move to where we would average the first marking period and second marking period to get your semester grade. And we are recommending that we begin this with our incoming 9th grade students. We also want to recommend that we have return of graded work to students within a timely manner. 10 days is our recommendation that we would like to see for the return of graded work to students. So the next area we want to address is defining minimal effort for 50% rule. Students who turn in just a blank sheet with their name on it, they are writing off topic, they have random answers not related to the assignment, would not earn a 50%, which is what's happening at this time. The other thing I want to share is that we also want to address final examinations. We are looking at summative assessments at this time and determine exactly how much weight it should have. We want to ensure that we are defining reassessment windows.
These changes take effect for students starting 9th grade in school year 2025-26. Worth noting that grading regulations are the purview of the superintendent, and he can make these changes on his own. The Board of Education sets grading policy as broad objectives around effective reporting for students and families and the reduction of variance between schools.
Every morning when I wake up, I brew me some coffee, fill up my cup.
The state's budget crisis has led many education advocates to be despondent over the pulling back on reforms called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. Governor Moore and the Democratic General Assembly pushed back on the ambitious goals when it became clear that the cost of paying for the reforms was coming up at a time when revenues would simply not keep up. But despite the budget crisis, Ike Leggett, the former Montgomery County executive, who now heads the state's Accountability and Implementation Board for the Blueprint, says that the education reforms are still on track. Here he is speaking at Montgomery County's District 18 Democratic Club breakfast meeting.
For the most part, the General Assembly and the governor have probably been on pretty good track here. There are a few changes, but nothing material at this point in time. When we look at the budget going forward, we could have some challenges going forward. Right now, the blueprint is fully funded. We made progress. We've gone from 41st to 20th in just a year and a half, and at least on reading. We've now decided to change how we provide reading in the curriculum for our kids, the science of reading, and we believe that will provide a great deal of impetus for school. That is where we are. So let's stop now.
Question?
Sure.
Okay. What are the teachers going to get planning time soon?
In order to get what we call collaborative time, more collaborative time, it's not time for teachers to goof off or anything of that sort. It is designed so the teacher can have special time with individual students, with other teachers to do greater planning, to deal with particular issues within the school day. In order to do that, you need more teachers. Remember, I started off by saying we do not have sufficient teachers in order to do that. So that part of the plan has been at least phased in a little bit slower because we do not have sufficient teachers in order to make that happen. I'm sorry.
Thank you for your good work. I'm one of the many federal employees and contractors who lost the job. What can be done to get people like myself into the classrooms, fast-tracking the certifications?
There are not enough potential teachers in the colleges and universities around the state or anywhere to fill that gap. So one of the ways we're going to do that is to sort of grow our own. So there are a number of initiatives that you can contact us about. Each local jurisdiction have individual programs to convert or to train people in a very fast-track way to, in fact, enter the classroom and become teachers. In fact, the governor provided some additional resources in his current budget that was passed to do precisely that.
Worth noting that Leggett says Maryland used to be ranked 41st out of 50 states in education outcomes, even behind Mississippi. Now it is ranked 20 in reading, further back in math. But as a state, Maryland's median household income has for decades ranked in the top 5 nationwide.
Turn on the telly, flip to the news, a little bit anxious, no, it's no use. The world's spinning faster.
In still more local education news, Sandy Spring Friends, the Quaker school in Sandy Spring near Olney in Montgomery County, Maryland, announced April 14th that they will be closing at the end of this school year due to financial trouble. The school requires an additional $14 to $16 million over the next to meet its obligations. In particular, its debt burden, while covering current expenses and maintenance costs. The campus is likely to be sold to meet these obligations. The school, it appears, has been teetering for some years. Enrollment has lagged since the pandemic, during which time they built a new upper school building. Last year, the head of school, Rodney Glasgow, departed suddenly in July. In October 2024, the interim head of school, Christine Lewis, left. Sandy Spring Friends used to board some students, including international students who brought in precious fees. But the boarding program was closed in December. And now the school will be closed.
Each day new disasters. It's taking a toll. Sailors are grasping. I'm tied to the ship.
Last week, Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. opened a full-service hospital east of the river in the city, the first new hospital to be built in Washington, D.C. in the last 25 years. The Cedar Hill Regional Medical Center sits on the historic St. Elizabeth's East Campus in Ward 8. It'll have 136 beds, trauma care, and a 54-bay emergency department, 30 for adults and 24 for children. The hospital will be run by George Washington University's Medical Faculty Associates.
People are people. I don't understand.
It's been a cooler spring, and we have planting recommendations from the Washington gardener, Kathy Jan.
This is a great time to practice patience, like all gardeners need to learn. But it is the cool season, as you say. So we have shoulder seasons in the greater DC area. So we have a spring season and a fall, and then we have our hot summer seasons. So in those cool seasons, you can be planting cool season edibles. So that would be your greens and your root vegetables. So your kale, your spinach, your arugula, and your root vegetables would include things like beets and carrots and radish. And as soon as it gets hot, which might happen like the first or second week of May, or sometimes as late as June, those plants tend to bolt, which means go to flower and then set seed, and then they become bitter. So you'll hear people say when a plant bolts that it's no longer edible. That's not true. You can still eat it. It's just not the most palatable, right? And then you want to pull that from your garden, and then you're going to plant your peppers, your tomatoes, your eggplants, your summer crops. And then on the ornamental side of things, we can be planting cool season annuals as opposed to our hot season annuals. So those cool season annuals would be your pansies, violas, snapdragons, those sorts of cool season flowers that like it cool at night. They can put up with a frost or two, and they're not going to die on you, versus our hot annuals, which we are going to wait until at least Mother's Day.
What about cilantro? Can I plant cilantro now?
Oh, absolutely. So cilantro is one of your cool season herbs. So that goes along with dill and some of the other fine leafy herbs you think about for the cool season. It hates our hot summer, kind of just melts, which is funny because you think of it, right, to go with more tropical cuisines. But if I was to do it in the summer, I would put it in the shade and put a shade cloth over it, because everything likes to chew on my cilantro. I don't know about you, Sunil, but every bug that is like, I love cilantro. And I'm like, I guess bugs don't have that gene that doesn't like cilantro.
What about peppers, like hot peppers? Can I do that?
So that you would start from seed inside under your grow lights, and you'll be planting that out once the soil is warm enough, not just the air temperature, but the soil has to be warm enough. And that, I would say, not earlier than Mother's Day, but better if you can do it early June, because that's when the soil is actually warm enough. And when you plant the plant in the soil, it will expand its roots. If you plant it too early, it's just going to sit. It won't expand its roots in cold soil.
What should we do to prepare our gardens for the big planting?
If you have raised beds, you can replenish some of the soil. You can add some compost to that and work that in. You could do a top dressing of like chopped up leaves or aged manure. Notice the term aged. So we don't want to use any fresh manure. You can buy aged manure in bags. So that could be chicken manure or anything else that was from a plant eating animal.
Several years ago, the planting zone for where we are in Washington, D.C. area, they changed that. What does the change mean for us?
The USDA said we're about a half zone warmer than they had previously reported. And part of that, they're saying it's not a change, it's just more accurate reporting. In that a lot of us have little microclimates. So probably your south-facing side of your house, much warmer, obviously, than your north-facing side. And we were able to, get many more readings over a 10-year period. So they were able to adjust it. What the hardiness zone tells you is the coldest the plant can take. That's all it tells you. It doesn't tell you the hottest it can take. So there is a hot zone chart, but most plant labels and stuff don't report that. It doesn't tell you the wind it could take. It doesn't tell you how much water or moisture. It just tells you the coldest that this plant can survive if the winter dips down to that without, I would say, any human interference. A plant could take colder if you threw a cover cloth on it.
In practical terms, does it make a difference to what we grow or try to grow?
No. There's always people who are zone pushing, who look to the zone south of them. They're like, I want that plant. So they can take their chances. I would say still aim for zone 7. Like we're pretty much in DC, the heart of zone 7. There's a little bit of zone 8 in Alexandria and Capitol Hill and some really warm areas of the city. But mainly Montgomery County, all the suburbs around, were pretty solid zone 7.
Kathy Jens, Washington Gardener, thank you.
Thank you, Sunil.
We go out with another spring perennial.
This is Christina Bobrow from Kensington, Maryland. Can you hear that? That is the sound of gas-powered leaf blower across the street from our house at Kensington Parkwood Elementary School. We have been hearing leaf blowers, weed whackers, edge trimmers, and lawn mowers since 8 o'clock this morning. It is now 6:30 in the evening. How long can this go on? This is a level of noise that is unreasonable for a residential neighborhood. This is crazy.
Montgomery County has banned gas-powered leaf blowers. The law went into effect this January for residents and will go into effect for commercial landscapers on July 1st. But the law does not cover lawnmowers and other gas-fired equipment. We love hearing from you, whether you have a rant or an appreciation. It's easy to send us a voice letter, record on your phone, and email the file to producer@ihppod.org. That's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that comes out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities of Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home.
Parents, to us mortals with all of our flaws, children and hearts in cages.
Music for this episode comes from Baltimore composer and woodwind player Seth Keibel. The songs come from his 2018 album called Tiny Hands, Big Desk. Flo Anito on vocals, Christian Perez on guitar, Bob Abbott, double bass, Tom Teasley, percussion, and Seth Keibel on the clarinet. Sound recording and engineering by Mike Harvey, Wes Lanich, and Steve Steckler. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.
This is not our United States. This is not my motherland.